Everyone hanging around for the essentially this is the roundtable panel discussion. This is going to be broadcasting both live on Facebook, I'm assuming, Eric, and also recorded in social media. So for even though that we have a lot of here, this is going to be something that people will be able to come back and watch down the road, because that's essentially what we're doing, is recapturing a little bit of history. As I sat through endless hours of reporting at the time as a journalist, I had asked Jim Olson or Perry Olson to be here to represent our KX folks from the media side, and unfortunately Jim had a family reunion, and Perry something about umpiring and a tournament in Fargo. Imagine that, people had busy schedules. But what I did want is a good representation of some of the leadership in different components from 2011 and moving forward. So if you can grab a microphone that's next to you, we'll go through and do introductions of the panel, and I'm going to help facilitate this a little bit and kind of drive it for the next 45 minutes.
Hello, I'm Brian Vinden. I'm from FEMA Region 8, External Affairs, and during the flood I was the External Affairs Officer for the federal response.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm retired Major General David Sprinsinatic, and during the 2011 event, I served as the Adjutant General for the state of North Dakota.
And I'm Alan Walter. I was the Director of Public Works for the city of Minot at the time, and I was the Emergency Operation Manager at the time.
I'm John Feldo. I was serving as Vice Chairman of the Ward County Commission. Jerome Grunberg was Chairman at the time. I'm currently the Chairman of the Ward County Commission today.
Mark Fulmer, Superintendent of Minot Public Schools. I had been principal in Magic City for 9 years and was just starting officially on July 1st of 2011.
I'm Allie Deloyers. I am representing the Minot Park District today, and just want to welcome you all to beautiful Oak Park. And just look how far we've come sitting here today. So thanks for being here.
Always a saleswoman. Selling the park. I love it. Keep going.
Hi, my name is Amanda Schooling. I was the Homeland Security Planner for Ward County up until the day we found out the water was coming, where I was the acting Emergency Management Director.
Yes, and I'm David Ashley, Chairman of the Service Joint Board. At that time, I was serving on the Joint Board and the McHenry County Water Board, and just trying to answer questions of what was going on and where do we go.
So for the folks at home who maybe have never heard of the Minot flood, Sean Sitma, I was the KXMC news reporter that did the 10 o'clock news and also reporting pretty much every day during the flood. Flew in a lot of the Blackhawks and, well, now serve as Minot's mayor, and thought that it would be a great idea to sit and have a little bit of roundtable discussion of leadership and other stories that just is away from the typical, let's call it the stuffy political setting. To start things off, I actually want to start over here with the former Adjutant General and former Public Works Director. If you can, either Alan or Mr. Sprinsinatic, tell me a little bit about, let's start with Mr. Sprinsinatic. How did you find out about Minot's situation and really gear towards, well, coming up to Minot to see the mess that the mouse was in?
Well, we, you know, as spring was rolling around, we knew we were going to have flood events across the state. We had a lot of snow, and you know, it looked like there would be some flooding. In the beginning, nothing near what we experienced. And as I continued to be briefed daily on what was happening to the north of us, it became obvious that the event here in Minot was going to be much greater than anyone had thought. And then even as the flood unfolded, suddenly we had rain on the plains and the snow in Saskatchewan, and that just, you know, made everything so much worse. So you know, the bottom line is you can't fool Mother Nature. She's going to do what she's going to do, and you know, we experienced it here, and the people in this community did a tremendous job fighting the flood, even though we weren't as successful as we'd hoped to be.
So Alan, we had fought this thing from May, well, actually back to April and March even. March, April, May, and that was out in the county reaches. just leading up to the, let's call it the, oh crap moment. You know, kind of give me your thoughts.
I was Director of Public Works before all this started, and still was during the event, but we had started fighting water and water issues in the middle of March, and kept working on that almost night and day up until the major event hit. We had my men working around the clock, double shifts, and were wearing them out. But as it got closer and closer to the event, it just kept getting worse and worse. And the moment that we realized we were going to lose everything, we had saved the city to 11,000 CFS, which is more water than we'd seen ever. And that afternoon, then, we'd saved the city. We got a report it was going to be 12,000 CFS. We were getting ready to fight that the next day. The next morning, they told us 15,000 CFS, and that's when I knew we weren't going to be able to save anymore. We had to protect the infrastructure that we had, that we could. That afternoon, it went to 15,000 CFS prediction. The next morning, it went to 20,000 CFS prediction. That afternoon, it went to 24,000 CFS. And the next morning, or the next day, it went to 30,000 CFS. So in 3 days, we went from saving the city at 11,000 CFS to no way possible to save it with 30,000 CFS coming from it at us.
That's a tough blow. I mean, with months of fighting, and then basically the 1-2-3 punch, that was just unimaginable. On the county side, John Feldo, you were a county commissioner at that point, and the flooding had started way back in early March, if I recall. And if you can maybe walk me through a little bit of, you know, how the commission was handling a lot of the outer reaches from the overland flooding early on to the big deluge.
Well, it was, like Alan said, kind of a progressive event that went on for 3 months or better. And we had, like everybody remembers, one flood threat earlier in April, I believe, and people were evacuated and had to come back. Out in the county, and the smaller cities out in the county, most affected, Burlington and Carpio was on the Des Lacs River, and then Sawyer and Velvet on the other side of Minot. They were all experiencing the river flow, but on top of that, we were getting rain events that were creating overland flooding within our county and other counties in the basin. And I live out west of Minot here along the Continental Divide, and I remember driving in and talking to Alan forecasts, because we had daily meetings going on for a while, being updated and saying, you can't believe the water this even coming down in our neighborhood in the overland flooding. Well, that contributed to coulees and all the things that lead up to the city. And so we had lots of roads within the county, both township and county roads, underwater for a long period of time. And a lot of the cropland didn't get planted that year because of the moisture in the system, and just the soil was saturated. And the last recent county road that we finally resurrected in the county was only 3 years ago, County Road 9A, and we put that on hold because it wasn't important traffic, but that's how long it's taken to finally repair some of the damage. And in some townships, it has never been repaired.
That's amazing. And one of the, we had two newbies that were kind of coming into the, let's call it the fold. So Dr. Vollmer and Amanda Schooling. Dr. Vollmer within Minot Public Schools. You weren't officially in that capacity, you said, until, what, July? July 1. And, well, June 22nd, everything goes to hell. And I probably know, by the way, everybody who doesn't know, this is my sister. And I told her she had to be here. My sister, Amanda Schooling, who had helped initiate into the broadcasting fold in 2009 when we had some of our initial issues, and she was the emergency, not the emergency manager, but Homeland Security planner. But so we had two people that were in new positions. But Mark, how did you mentally come into this? I mean, you just literally took the job, and a big portion of what you were supposed to be leading was destroyed.
Couple of things. First of all, in the March and April battles, and in the early June, I was working side by side with Dr. David Loyson, very much in tune to what was going on. When the water actually went over, I always joke with people that I had no way out of town anyway, so I couldn't go anyplace. But there were a lot of things that happened in that time, and it's really easy to get down and to feel that it's really tough to recover, and that, you know, the world is against you. But we had some very good friends that lost a daughter in a car accident. At that time, I was able to get out to the funeral in Rugby around 2nd of July, I believe it was, and it put it in perspective. Through all of this, we did not lose human life. Property is one thing, and it was terrible what happened, but this could have been so much worse. And we just rolled up our sleeves and went to work like everybody else in Minot, and worked to make it happen.
So Amanda, she hates me right now a lot. So, is the emergency manager, because the current emergency manager was out with some, if I recall, some health issues or something, just wasn't available, and you became the full-time emergency manager, acting emergency manager for Ward County, literally in the worst disaster that we'd ever seen. And by the way, she was the one who had called me that morning when news had officially broke that said, realize that you had just moved some stuff back home, but you got to get everything out because we're going to flood.
He should have listened to me is what I'm going to lead with, but.
So she was the very first person who told me that my house was going to be destroyed. But tell me a little bit about, from your stance, I know you're not in the public light anymore, but how do you mentally put yourself into that capacity to try to take on this challenge?
I was asked by the Ward County Commission 10 minutes prior to us finding out about the 30,000 cubic feet per second coming at us. So I had 10 minutes to kind of deal with that. But in the end, there was nobody else around who wanted the job, and you pretty much just kind of had to roll with the punches and try to do your best to help the community the best that you could. And it was a very, very busy time, but we were in the Emergency Operations Center since April of that year, so we were already kind of established as our own family in the Emergency Operations Center, and we were very, very good with each other. I mean, we worked well with each other. If I needed anything, I knew anybody in the Emergency Operations Center could, you know, handle everything and work together as a family. So it was really a family group effort with all of us.
No, I don't think Amanda could find a way out of town either.
And if she did, I was going to find her. So I was going to say one individual that, or at least one position here that has been absent from today, and I want to make acknowledgement of that and appreciation for all the hard work. But Jerome Grunberg was the county commissioner at that time and the mayor of Burlington. And, you know, there was a tremendous amount of stress and hardship on him and his family. So while we had hoped Jerome would be here, we certainly appreciate the work that he did, and wanted us to at least acknowledge that. And I know, Amanda, you had a great working relationship with him. John, you knew him very well, and I knew Alan. Well, everybody kind of knew everybody during that period. So people had questions, we could find answers. But I want to drive now, or switch gears real quick to the affected. And well, Dave Ashley sits on the SRJB as the chair, was also very heavily impacted from the flood. And of course, we have Ellie Deloriers here, who also was in our video just a few minutes ago. So we know you were affected. Thank you, Derek. We still appreciate that. So we've got two flood-affected people, but two people also that are very much a part of the recovery component. One of the Minot Parks and Zoo, and then also here with the SRJB. So Ellie, if you want, from your personal point, the house was destroyed, and then maybe work your way into the interesting stories of the zoo that nobody knows.
Yeah, the personal one. That's the slippery slope. You're gonna get me crying up here. You know, and I think a lot of people had to balance that. A lot of people were dealing with losing their homes and then going to work and, you know, losing their businesses or big parts of it. But, you know, personally, it was, we all just rode that wave, right? Where we got to be evacuated and we got to move everything out. And then thanks to our amazing city staff and state leaders, we got comfortable. We could move back in. And I think a lot of us were, you know, we thought we beat it. And we went in and we painted and we were just excited to go back. And then, like you said, that oh crap moment, like this is happening. This is real life. Looking down the street, and it was so surreal. It was like a war zone. It's really hard to describe. Those memories are really, and I think that when I look back at it, I mean, I remember being in our living room and people coming off the street that we didn't know, and they're like, "What do you need us to take?" And I'm like, "Who are you?" You know, but the multiple stories like that, and that's when it came back to, you know, coming back into your home. For me personally, I come from a small Class B town, and I graduated with 6 people. Well, 2 of the people I graduated with were a plumber and electrician, and they said, "We will be there. You just got to let us know when." And they came and they put everything back in, and my husband went to give him a check, and they're like, "No, you guys getting back home is enough of a gift to us." So I think the stories like that, you know, there was a lot of bad things that happened, but the good things definitely outweigh the bad. And when you talk about the zoo, I think that's another great example, or all over the Park District. You know, evacuating 150 animals in 24 hours is not an easy task. And safety was always the first priority, safety for our keepers and safety for our animals, and they did it. And that's kudos to our leadership and our zoo staff. And, you know, it's not like you're moving cats and dogs, which, don't get me wrong, I know is challenging as well, but a giraffe can't go in a regular horse trailer. So there are 3 different transportation companies in the United States that transport giraffes. We made one call, and they all headed this direction. And the one call, they're like, "I'm close enough, I'm gonna get him." Just stories like that. And, you know, the Zoo Nation is a big family, so our animals went all over the place. And then we had the North Zoo up on North Hill.
Well, that's what I was going to say. Not all of the animals
Nope.
left the state. Some just literally went north of
They
town.
did. Ward County, and they might regret it now because it took a little bit to get that smell out of there. Yeah. So, yeah, we would get multiple calls of, "I think the camels are loose." They're like, "No, they're just going for their walk for the day. It's fine." But, yeah, it was all hands on decks, and the stories are just unbelievable. And it's really exciting to get, I don't want to say exciting because I don't want to diminish anybody's feelings and thoughts that they're going through still with the flood, but as we look down the road and we're working with the Service River Joint Board and the city of Minot, there's light at the end of this tunnel, and there's going to be some really good things that do come out of it through the Greenway. So,
And that was one of the points that so many people thought, you know, when we had done the stories about all of the bears and tigers that went everywhere, and we got them back years later. But the camels and the penguins and all of that, they're sitting up in a county North building just chilling. Zoo North that
Yeah.
not too many people remember or knew about.
yeah, they were, you know, just on a little getaway trip. So, and our keepers, once again, our amazing keepers, they were out there 24/7. So we always had zoo staff on site. So those keepers are amazing. They love those animals like their own, and but even to that extent where they were sleeping right next to them.
The lions and tigers weren't there, so there.
No, let's make that point. No, we were okay.
So Dave, from the standpoint of the rural aspect, you farm and ranch right down in the Mouse River Valley, member of the SRJB. You were heavily impacted. Tell us a little bit about your story, and then kind of on the professional side, how you had to pick up a very heavy torch.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, you know, as I was thinking about this, as we all have said and know, there's so many stories we could go on. Where, you know, we were heavily impacted as everyone else in the rural aspect of it. You know, I'd be on those calls that Alan mentioned and stuff, and John did, and man, it it was hard to take, you know, and you're trying to relay this information on to folks. Hey, what you did in all the previous floods, you know, you've been through it, you're war-worthy on that. This is unlike anything else. It was a huge challenge to get that out, and when it hit, we were as prepared as we could be. My hometown was Velva, you know, one of the fortunate ones in the basin, but it wasn't through lack of significant effort that they were saved. We had the whole town evacuated, but it was problematic, and we almost lost it due to hydrology on the east side of the bridge there. So we're sitting at, you know, okay, this is going through all the problems we're looking at, and what do we do, you know? Nobody knew, okay, what's next? What's the next step? We have to take a look at this. And the joint board had some experience with the previous floods and stuff. And the state of North Dakota gave us a call. Mr. Tim Fay said, you know, we need to have a meeting. Let's come up to Minot and have a meeting. And we had an inclination of what was going on. We'd been in conversations before and stuff and said, okay, we've got to move this ahead. State will do what we can. City of Minot's ready to go to work. You guys want to take over on this one? We go, whoa. But I'll tell you, it was instantaneous from all of our board members. We weren't going to hold back. That's one of the things we do. Immediately, motion was made and seconded and passed immediately. We're gonna tackle this one, you know. However big it gets, and we didn't know what that was, and it's way bigger than we initially inspected what we were going to be doing here. So you got to start looking around for inspirational things. Why are you doing this? How are you going to move forward on this? And I'd like to thank you for holding it together. I don't know if I will, you know. And I mentioned earlier today about toughness, and I don't know if I'll be very tough with this one, but it's a personal story, but it's a story that reflects to a lot of the people in the basin. And during the flood, peak of the flood, my granddaughter was walking with her aunt up in North Minot. They lived on 5th Avenue Northwest. And they were out walking. One of her favorite things with her aunt was to go down to the Dairy Queen there and you know, visit that and other places down there. And of course they're standing there, and I have this picture of her looking down the floodway, church in the background. It's a pretty awesome picture. And this little 5-year-old girl is standing there, you know, and typical 5-year-olds. And she was, I'll be honest, she was kind of a little bugger when she was 5. I'll be honest. and she's looking down at that, well, what about my trip to get my ice cream cone? You know, typical little kid. And her aunt said, well, there's problems there, you know, it's flooded. And things started to change in her. She started looking around. She started to think outside of herself a little bit. Well, what about my friends? Will I see them again? You know, and she, my aunt reassured her, yes, they will. They'll be okay. Everybody's taking care of things. You know, they're taking care of themselves. People are helping people. And so this little 5-year-old girl starts expanding her thought. Well, my great-grandma, she just lives over there. She lived on 4th Avenue Northwest. And of course, her aunt said, you know, I think she'll be okay. Don't worry about it. If she's got to move, we'll take care of it. Please don't worry about it, you know, trying to reassure this little girl. And this little girl kept to expanding. Well, just a minute now. I've got a pony out on Grandpa's farm. Is it going to be okay? Yeah. Well, not just that. And literally her conversation was going, well, what about their cows and their land and their house and all that stuff? And well, you know, they'll have to deal with it. We'll get through this, you know. And the little girl continues on, you know, well, what about you know, her uncle and so on? They'll be okay. They'll be okay. Kept reassuring her. Well, you know, what are we going to do? She started forward thinking, and I'm really proud of this girl for that. You know, okay, we've got this mess. What are we going to do afterwards? And we've been talking about, you know, what work we were going to be doing in the future on this flood control project, even though we weren't officially tapped to reach into this. And she said, her aunt said, well, your grandpa's going to start working on this. Immediate response is, well, he better get busy. So I look at that picture every day. And that little girl from 10 years ago, 5, she's 15 now, no, if she could think of outside this for the whole basin and everybody else, I know we all can. And to this day, I can see the switch that changed from that little bugger at 5 years old to one of the most concerned people for other individuals I've ever met. And that drives me every day.
Thank you, Dave. So we haven't heard from FEMA yet. I haven't forgot about you, Brian. So for everyone's full disclosure here, as I always say, I interviewed Brian a number of times as a journalist up until my end in 2013 when I switched out. And I was tough on you a couple of times. I will absolutely say that, and probably even need to apologize a little bit. But so FEMA came in a very difficult situation in North Dakota, the worst devastating disaster that had ever hit Minot and perhaps even North Dakota in terms of size and scope, magnitude, longevity. Longevity was the big one. From your personal side of things, how did you kind of feel or see this disaster unfold from your side coming in as a FEMA representative?
Sure, and in full disclosure, I'm not just a FEMA employee, I'm also a North Dakotan. Like Ellie, I grew up in a small Class B town. I'm from Garrison, so I spent a lot of time here as a kid. You know, like Spry mentioned, we obviously knew that statewide there was challenges with water, and so we were already on the ground here in early April, based on some things that had gone on in other parts of the state, and just kind of continued to watch, just like everybody else. We were in our office in Bismarck, and sort of almost dumbstruck with first what was happening on the Missouri, and having grew up in Garrison, seeing the dam open up, that was a unbelievable sight. But then to see what was ending up coming this way, I think just the fact that we were already on the ground was sort of a unique situation versus, a lot of events happen with no warning, and so we're popping in at the last minute.
It's not too often FEMA's there before the biggest part
No,
of the disaster. Okay.
Exactly. So in some ways we were working closely with the state on making a lot of preparations on what we could do, what resources we could make available. But until it happens, you really don't know how things are going to play out. But I think a lot of folks have already mentioned, really, it's all about relationships and the people and who we've worked with over time, and certainly there's difficult situations. Sometimes we can't give the answer that someone wants to hear, but we're always going to be forthright and honest about it, and give an explanation of why we make the decision we make. And like you said, it was long. I finally wrapped up in September of 2013, and that was just our operation. But we've continued to be engaged with the city even through today with various workshops and things that we've worked with Senator Hoeven's staff and his team, helping to identify resources for the flood control project, just various other initiatives, the mitigation project at the water treatment plant. So, but it was all those initial relationships that we built with that we were able to kind of sustain and move forward with.
Now, I was just talking with the North Dakota Department of Emergency Services, if his ears, he caught it. So I was just talking with them, and we talk about the longevity of the 2011 flood. Of course, flood controls 20 more years of construction, but DES was just talking about closing out one of the files from the 2011 flood on just finally putting it to bed. And that in itself is a milestone, a decade later. So it's stuff like that as we watch the video today, a lot of memories come flooding back, a lot of tough memories. I remember one of the most odd, and Sprints and Attic, I don't remember if you were part of that conversation or not, but it was June 25th, 2011. I'm sitting up at Magic City campus waiting on a Blackhawk. And this is where I'm going to now dive into the personal stories and just the odd stuff that maybe people didn't know or don't want to know. I don't know. But I'm sitting up at the Magic City campus waiting to get on a Blackhawk, and AP, national news, and internet, everybody is here to see the big disaster. Of course, I'm just wishing to hell they would go away because they're here for a day and gone and not doing us any favors. But at that day, I did not have a ride in a Blackhawk. And KX had been airing pretty much 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, all of our video, and then live coverage. And I looked at the young National Guard guy, and I couldn't to this day tell you who it is, but I explained to him the situation and that it was really important that we be there. And he said, well, he's sorry, and I started to make phone calls. And of course, my first call was to my sister. And then she made a couple of phone calls, and I don't remember the chain of command of where it went, but the young airman or the young National Guard soldier's phone rang about 3 minutes after that. And KX had a seat on the Blackhawk helicopter, and we were able to air, which turned out to be actually one of the best flyovers because it was a day like today. There was some overcast skies, not very much wind. It was before that severe weather rolled in. And it was almost serene across the entire flyover area that we had hit. And I think I had shot an hour and 10 minutes worth of video, which we saw a lot of today. But it was stuff like that where, and I'm not going to say community coming together, I called in a dang favor to do that. But with the journalist side, it's a whole different facet of what we kind of went through. But I'm curious, from your side, what are the odds, the one little ping thing that sticks out in your mind that's just odd that maybe some folks at home don't remember, some people that went through the flood don't remember?
General Sprincenatic and I were just talking about this. When we did that flyover that day, we flew over the schools and we saw just how pathetic they looked. We had built these ring dikes, we expanded the ring dikes, and they literally looked like a soup bowl full of mucky water. I mean, everyone was breached until we got out to Perkett. And we flew over Perkett, and that was the only green that we could see in the valley, was that little bit of green around Perkett. And Spry said, we can save that. And I thought, you are crazy, man. We're not going to save that. So he said, don't worry about it. We'll take care of it. Line up a couple of boats, and we went out and we helped with the guardsmen guide as they dropped in these huge, I don't know how much those bags of sand weighed. Do you remember, General?
They're 1-ton sandbags.
Yeah. Then the first couple went in really, really easy, but and that was quick and easy. I think we were out in the water that day for about 6 hours. But later, when they had to be more strategically placed and the spotters in the boats would say a little bit this way, that way, whatever, we were inundated with water, you know, because they were hovering over the water and we were just inundated with water. Well, that was also about the same time that Alan made his famous don't worry about boiling the damn water comment. And that night we got home, and after eating sandwiches that somebody brought out to us and being pelted with water, I was pouring bottled water over my toothbrush, and I thought, what in the world am I doing here? You know, we've been literally swimming in this water forever. But General came through, and we saved Perkett. We saw a lot. We were all together through the whole thing. We saw high points where it looked like we were winning. We saw low points when we thought that ancillary dike was going. But we were talking earlier about people not understanding these elected officials and the work that they've done. And I still stand by the point that I think it's good that people don't. Otherwise, nobody would ever run for political office.
So I'm going to look to Alan. He brought it up, boil the damn water. The press conference. And I remember the number of questions. Well, if I put my baby's bottle in the dishwasher and it gets to X degrees, and if I just turn the water on as hot as possible, and I could see you, Alan, fuming at the pulpit, the dais. What do you remember on that one? Or was your head so foggy? Just tell me about it.
My head wasn't foggy. I was standing out in the audience and they were talking about this, where you gotta boil the water to wash the baby's clothes, and then you gotta rinse the baby's clothes in boiled water, and you gotta wash your hands and boil with water that has been boiled. You gotta rinse your hands with water that's been boiled, and you gotta put the infection soap on
Antibacterial.
your
Yep.
hands and all that stuff. And I'm sitting there, I'm thinking, what are these guys talking about? So I got up there. I went up to the mayor and I said, "Can I say something, Mayor?" And he says, "Yes, yeah, go ahead." So I said, I got up there and I said, "I've got people, city employees working in this water. I've got the National Guard people working in this water. I've got citizens working in this water. I've got the U.S. Marshal people working in this water. I've got everybody working in this water, and you're telling us we got to boil the water." I said, "It don't make any," I said, "You're telling us we got to boil the damn water. It don't make any sense." So that's how that evolved. I got another story. After the flood was up and we were coasting, starting to go down, I'd go out every morning. I'd get up every morning at 4, go out and look at things, drive around the city at 5, and I'd stop in at the water plant because of this boil order thing, ask him how it was going, and talking to one of the employees there, and he said, "We got this boil order." He said, "I went home yesterday afternoon. I got off at 3 o'clock. I went home, and my wife is pouring water out of a water bottle into the dog's dish and into the cat's dish." And I said, "What are you doing?" He said to her, "What are you doing?" And she said, "Well, we can't have these animals drinking this dirty water." And he said, "Those animals lick their butt."
The same animals that drink out of the toilet.
Yeah. And then another one, I'm driving around checking the city one day, I'm driving down Broadway, and I see a sign on the bank. It says, "Do you need a home improvement loan? Come and see us." I thought there might be a few of those around. There's lots of stories I could tell you
there
some more.
is. I remember when, just from our standpoint, so my house literally is right over here. And for anyone who might be watching the video or here who doesn't know, the water in Oak Park, I mean, literally, if we were to put a high water mark right here, it'd be about where the top of the rock and up on the silver pillar is, right here. It was that dang high, and it wasn't just sitting here, it was flowing. So it took all that time. It was, we left our house, we actually evacuated May 30th, because that was the first round of evacuations, and we didn't come back until July 19th. That's when we were finally able to get back to our house over here on 4th Avenue Northwest, July 19th. Flooded the 22nd, obviously, but July 19th. And we walked in the night before at sundown, like so many. I mean, heck, I think we passed somebody coming out. So the rule was you couldn't go to your house unless you could walk to it on your street. Our street was completely bare, and every other street around it was completely bare except for a low spot where we couldn't get there for about 3 or 4 days. So we walked on what was the grass on the dike. We ended up walking back, and it was the most eerie, quiet, and foul-smelling, disgusting aloneness I think I had ever experienced. I had my wife with me, and I took a KX camera with me, and I literally had to kick in my back door to see the condition of the house, and the condition of the house is just horrid. But we were standing out in our front yard, and I was taking video of all of my neighbors' houses, and I'd got to know my neighbors only actually really well up in the last 3 months. Before then, it was see 'em and wave, but I really got to know them really well in the 3 months previous to that, because with the flood waters and discussing, what everybody thought about it. But standing there with my wife, and we had that conversation of, I really wonder who's going to be able to come back. And we ended up losing several homes because the foundations had crumbled. And I think it was kind of in that moment where it was that decision for us of that we have to. I mean, there really wasn't any other option. And in whatever it took, we were going to have to come back and put everything we had into it. And as tough as the feelings were and as bad as everything seemed, it was just kind of in that moment, we didn't know all through that, even flying over on the 26th when I was able to get video of my own house and see 6.5 feet of water, 11.5 feet of water on my main street. That was kind of the moment for us. That was kind of a shifter, a change point for us. But so General Sprincenatic, I was understanding that we had National Guard members that actually lived here and had homes flooded. How you know, retired now, but you've got a lot of experience. How did those folks take it and handle it?
Well, they, you know, as soldiers, we try to be as professional as we can, and you know, we tried to account for all of the soldiers and airmen from the North Dakota National Guard that, you know, lived in the community and had lost their home, and then we reached out to them and did what we could to take care of them. And having said that, you know, they all felt that their first responsibility was still to fight the flood and to protect the city of Minot and Ward County as much as possible. And that's one of the things that I'll never forget. You know, we had nearly 1,000 soldiers and airmen here at the peak, and you know, they were so driven to, you know, to do what they could to protect the community, to protect the people. And you saw in the video the young airman from Fargo. Her mission was to go door to door and tell people to be prepared to evacuate in 15 minutes because the sirens are going to go off. And she literally ran from door to door. And you can hear in the background some heavy breathing, which is the reporter trying to keep up with her. And I'm not sure who that was.
That was Galen, and he was not in shape.
But she, you know, she epitomizes what our Guard members did, and that is to do everything physically possible to protect the community and the people. And I'll never forget when the sirens blew, the sick feeling that I had, the feeling of sadness, and I talked to our soldiers and airmen afterwards, and they all experienced the same. You know, they, up to that point, they thought that we could save the community. And, you know, when the sirens blew and we knew we couldn't do anything more, they, you know, our Guard members were just heartstruck.
And that's, we had a United States Air Force, and I forget her rank, but she had a house on the corner that she had bought 4 months prior. And that was one of them that the foundation had crumbled, and I think that ended up actually going back to the VA. But a lot of different circumstances, as I alluded to earlier today. It was a different circumstance for every house, both in the disaster and in the recovery. It was a different circumstance for the different communities and the different subdivisions. John, on the side of the county, you know, you live south of town, but you had a lot of friends who were also impacted on that. And from the county side, you know, how is that dealing with that much disaster and friends and family?
Well, I do live south and west of Minot, so I'm close to the Continental Divide, high and away from the water, but I had a sister-in-law and a brother-in-law, and my son were both flooded. And my brother-in-law's house was bought out by the city of Minot for flood protection, and my son and sister-in-law have rebuilt their house since. So one thing I remember too in these incident command meetings, Dana Larson was incident commander, I believe, in the beginning, and when we finally were able to do the LiDAR and predict the height of the flood, like Ellen was talking, that tool could pinpoint a piece of property and say exactly what they predicted when we finally got that prediction, what it was going to be, the height, the elevation. And my son lives not too far from where Sean's house is. And so I went to my son. We'd already evacuated his house once, moved stuff up to the second story of his house. And I said, we got to get it all out of the house, and showed him where it was going to be. And it was like, that can't be possible. And it was hard to imagine. One of the things I always remember was after the flood and what people did and how they had to deal with their home, which is for most of them their biggest investment in their life. And meeting with neighborhoods outside in the county. I remember going out to Teresito, Vallejo, and all those kind of developments east between here and Burlington, and meeting with people, and they all had questions. What are we gonna do? What's the plan? And we had to wait for the people from FEMA and all those organizations, as well as working with Amanda and all the things we did, working not only to help these people get back on their feet, but try and preserve and rebuild the infrastructure that was lost throughout the county. And it was just hard to believe. And not all this was lost to the river. For the county, it was lost to the heavy rainfall and snowfall of that year that Amanda can talk about the paperwork we went through for years, and working with all the township boards, and those people sacrificed a lot of their time to work for their neighbors and in their township. And I don't know, I'm rattling on, but it just took a monumentous task of people throughout the county and in the whole basin. And some of that's still going on. So it took a lot of dedication by a lot of people that weren't necessarily personally affected, but to save our county and communities.
I'd referenced this earlier. One of the actual really aftermath points that caught me was taking my son to school for the very first day, and we started late that year in September because we really, you really had a lot of stuff to do. Just a couple things to try to pull off the miracle. But walking my son into Lincoln at First Presbyterian, that to me, I'd mentioned foggy earlier to Alan, but that is when one of those issues to me was foggy, because it just felt, we all felt displaced at that point. It was snowing that day. I remember that. It was cruddy weather in September. We had an early snowfall or something going on. That was one of the moments where we had schools displaced. We had one of the other points that really hit me hard is there was I found a family from Fargo that was driving around. And the only reason I found them because they stopped and honked the horn. We were gutting out the house, and they had bought a whole big cooler full of ice cream sandwiches. And they were driving around to homeowners and handing out ice cream sandwiches as just you need an energy boost, you need a smile, something like that. And to hear the sound of the Salvation Army truck coming down with water and a cold or a ham sandwich or whatever it was, that stuff sticks with me. We've gone just about an hour here. Is there any quick little item that really points out in any one of your thoughts or memories that we want to capture here? By all means, jump in.
Yeah. Once again, as I mentioned earlier, so many things going on through your mind. And here's the, it was mentioned earlier, and this is so crucial throughout the basin, because there was devastation that went on because of the drag on and the flood, where folks weren't getting into their properties till into October to start finding out what the issue was and all that stuff. And the key thing is, it's a miracle, no loss of life. That's one that I always come back to. People were so smart. I know of one that really wasn't. I did some very foolish things at that time, trying to save things and do things, and it's a miracle but it was a miracle, no loss of life, and that's phenomenal. That's a testimony to a lot of smart folks.
We talk about luck. I think Mark's got one, but real quick, Brian Johnson dropped this huge tree. Brian Johnson, the city forester, right over there off of 4th Avenue across from Sammy's as that secondary dike was being built. He was told that by XL, that it was dead, and it wasn't, and it knocked out power to that northeast corridor during the building of that secondary dike. But that was one. We got lucky, and he even says, I'm just lucky to be here. But he dropped this huge, huge river bottom tree right across the power lines, and it wasn't dead, but it was shortly after that.
I was just going to add that I get a lot of calls from other school districts around the nation that are going through that, some type of a natural disaster. And, I say we didn't do everything right, but we always try to put people first. And I think that in the midst of a crisis, a natural disaster, whatever it is, if you can focus on people, first and foremost, you're always going to do right, and Minot did that.
Ellie, Amanda, any closing thoughts? Sometimes not the easiest.
I think just a thank you, which doesn't seem like enough, especially from a park district perspective. Thank you to our state and city leaders for always having our backs in the community out there. Our partners, we were all in really rough shape, but I think, like I talked about, we're seeing that light at the end of the tunnel. So thank you to our community, the Oakaholics. They're part of the reason we have this beautiful amphitheater today. You know, it's those things that you kind of forget, but you don't, because we won America's favorite park in Minot, North Dakota, in huge part to our community, the Oakaholics. And it's one of those funny things that you remember. It was when really social media just started growing. And a Cincinnati Park District they were leading by a lot. And we had just put a video out, and they realized what we were going through. And then they countered with a video being like, yeah, we don't want it anymore, vote for Minot. So it's just those things that, like we talked about, there were a lot of really sad things, but there was a whole lot of good that came out of it too.
That was $100,000 from Coca-Cola that
Yep.
came out of that.
Yeah, and Oak Park was our first park back because of that. So we were back on the anniversary a year later.
Yep.
So, yeah, it's great.
For me, it was a lot. Like I said, we worked really well together as a community, and I can't thank enough. Nels Anderson, he unfortunately passed away earlier this year, but he was our savior for our shelter that the city had to come up with when the Red Cross left in July. We kind of looked at each other. None of us knew how to run a shelter at all. And I can still remember Nels. He was always smiling, always happy. Amanda, what can I do for you? How can I make your life easier? And you know, he managed the shelter. He did everything he can. And Susan Wagers with the Souris Animal Shelter, we housed over 900 dogs and cats, not at the Souris Valley Animal Shelter because we didn't have enough room there. So luckily the 4-H Extension helped us out a lot with that.
North Central Research Extension Center, Animal Shelter North, or Animal Shelter South, sure.
So it just, like I said, it really takes a community, and things just came at you off the wall, things that we had to take care of, and we dealt with it as a family and as a community. And I think that's why we're here today.
You forget about that. And one aspect that is missing here today, and I think we need to acknowledge that, is the faith-based organizations that came into this community, or that were part of this community, and really rallied support. Hope Village and so many others that came in to gut out homes and helped basically, even with donations, some monetary, some not, some were building supplies, but there's a tremendous amount of gratitude for all of those faith-based groups that made an impact on a lot of individual homeowners in that time. So absolutely, thank you to them. I forgot about the animal shelter or the animal temporary shelter on South Hill too. Brian, FEMA side, you're just happy to be back in Minot, aren't you?
You know, honestly, it is a rare opportunity to come back. We're off and in the response and in the immediate recovery, but this is really an opportunity to kind of see the legacy of what we were a small part of, and that's really, I think, come across that recovery. It takes everybody. It's not. There's no one entity that can, even if in the Magic City, there's no magic wand that can fix everything. But if you can pool the resources and the dedication and the efforts of, you know, the federal, the state, the local, the voluntary agencies, just the citizens at large, neighbors helping neighbors, all of that is what ultimately brings a community back, and I think Minot's been able to really show that and be an example to communities across the country.
Thank you, Brian. And as we probably close this out here, as this will end up on social media, I would certainly encourage anyone who would be watching this to share some of the stories too that maybe time has forgotten about, and some of the different uniquenesses that arose. I mean, we haven't even talked about the 3-hour drive from North Hill to South Hill on Highway 83. or the quick trip around Lake Darling to avoid that, or any number of the other oddities. Marketplace Foods North Hill on the temporary tent that they had put up, and just a slew. The camper backyard barbecues that went on for months, because we had how many homes with how many people in them, and people that opened up their doors to strangers. The last minuscule story I'm going to tell before we wrap up here. So it was the 21st, late in the afternoon. I had just taken over at 10 o'clock for the news, and we were talking about social media. Facebook was kind of still a new thing and not a bad thing yet. I say that tongue-in-cheek. But we had been talking about trying to reach out and share information, and this one gal had written in, and her neighbor was 92 years old and hadn't had anything evacuated and was trying to get some stuff out. Can anyone help? And we brought that up on the KX Social Media Facebook page, and we read it a couple of times. And that's why I remember so much about Minot Air Force Base. That was a Minot Air Force Base person that led the attack on that house. And within about 3 hours, they had every single thing from that 92-year-old lady's house evacuated prior to the sirens going off. And she ended up having to go to a shelter, but they were able to take all of her stuff up to Mesa Arena. And she was able to save a lot of her personal possessions because of the community reaching out, coming together, and doing amazing things in just a really tough time. So when we talk about the magic of Minot, it is the people. And sometimes the worst brings out the best in us. Thank you to each and every person for coming out and spending time. We finally got a cloud to give us a break. Thank you to everybody that's staying with us in Oak Park. Spent time today remembering good, the hard, but the hopeful. And I know that we will continue to work hard and come together as a community because of great people, just like all of you that are sitting up here, and all of the greatness that really I know we can achieve. So thank you so much.